Hi, welcome to my latest video. Today I'm going to be looking at this duct here across the top of the engine on my Land Rover Freelander 2. This is the 2.2 diesel engine. The car is a XS model, so it's a 4-cylinder diesel. It's an 09 plate, 2009. So this one actually has these strange looking chambers on the air intake. What I'm thinking of doing is replacing this intake here with a nice silicone and metal pipe. You can see here some oil has been leaking. Oil does find its way into this pipe from this breather hose here. So that hose goes down to the back of the engine and allows the crankcase below the pistons to vent any gas that gets past the piston rings. Okay, because if pressure builds up in the crankcase, then oil will start leaking out of the seals, so it's got to go somewhere. So the standard factory setup is that pipe comes up and is dumped in here. Now you'll notice on this engine that's the air filter. Okay, so there's an air intake there, there's a duct in the wing, comes round in here, up through the filter, across here we've got the airflow sensor there, mass airflow, so it's like a hot wire with a sort of a thermistor on there that measures the not just the flow of the air but also the temperature of the air coming in, allowing the computer to do its calculations and get the fueling right. So we've got a join here. This here looks a bit like a joint because there's a sort of clipped thing around it, but that's not actually a joint. That there is just some sort of protective bit. Not sure what against, because there's a large gap between the engine and that. Then it goes down here. Then we get all the horrible oily, carbony, sooty gas coming in, and then it goes off down to the turbocharger and round through the intercooler into the engine. So all this rubbish that's coming in here is downstream of the air filter. It's not filtered, so it's going straight into the engine. It's no wonder that oil is leaking out over there. So it's interesting to note actually that the later Freelander 2s, the sort of facelift 2012, 2013 onwards, didn't have these chambers. So what exactly are these weird looking things here? Well, some people believe that they're some kind of acoustic resonance chambers that maybe make the music sound better in the car, a bit like a kind of a church organ. They're actually harmonic chambers there to get rid of sort of standing waves that can build up in the air intake. Obviously the valves are opening and closing on the engine and the air comes in. There's a different path length for the air to get to each cylinder, hence the different lengths here, and as those valves open and close you can get sort of standing waves building up, these kind of resonance actually of the air as it's moving in, and these help to get rid of that. Well, somebody at Land Rover put them there for a very good reason. They must have spent hours designing those and getting the lengths absolutely right. Based on that, I'm going to rip them out. I don't like the look of them really, so what I want to do is replace them with something like this, something that looks a lot nicer. So we'll put something like that across the top of the engine. We'll join up here to that, get rid of this, get rid of that, and then this is going to need a little bit of work here to get the length right, and that will come in to the air filter there. Okay, so that should look a lot better. Whether or not it will perform better, I don't know. I'm not doing it for performance reasons, I'm just doing it because it looks good. So big problem though is this pipe doesn't have any stubs for the breather hose to connect to, and to be honest, I don't actually want that horrible sooty smoky gas going in to the intake. I'd rather have nice clean air from the air filter only. So what are we going to do with that? You can't block it up, that'll pressurise the crankcase. So one option is to fit a breather can or an oil catch can like this. It's a metal can that unscrews. It's got a little dipstick in the top there, and this breather hose on top. So this breather can be put straight on the top of the can like that, or you could have a hose off to a breather. This one was bought on eBay. It comes with assorted unions and hose connectors, a bit of pipe. Biggest problem really, whilst this looks absolutely lovely, it needs to go somewhere in the engine bay, out of sight probably, like down here. I don't know where else it could go. I've seen people mount them down here next to the power steering reservoir. That's one option, I suppose. It would be better over this side, I think, because the breather hose is there and we can just extend that round into here. So there is a bracket on the back there. It's worth mentioning actually, that bracket touches the can. It's not a very good design, so when you unscrew that, it's going to scratch this lovely blue anodized finish. So I'm going to have to do something with that. It has an in and an out, but it also has this breather. It's a bit confusing really as to how to set this up. The breather appears to be on the input side. Maybe that's so that gas can vent before the oil drips into the can. What comes out, I don't know. I don't actually really want anything coming out. I want to catch the oil. So maybe that one gets blocked up. It's tricky really. This here has an optional blanking bolt. So maybe one option is to run that output there over to this breather and locate it somewhere. I don't know. I like it like this actually, with the breather on top. It's quite neat. So where to put that? Well, there's a big space down here. It would quite nicely go down here somewhere. Not many bolts or anything available here. There's a bolt head there. Could probably fabricate a bracket to put it down there. Needs to be easily accessible so that little dipstick on it can be lifted out and checked, and also reach in and every now and then undo the can and empty out the goo that is inside. So what I need to do is make some sort of bracket, maybe a 3D printed bracket, to mount it down here somewhere. So the next part of the video I'll be looking at doing that, and then we'll look at actually getting this hose cut to size and put in and route the breather over to the catch can. Okay. So what I've decided to do with this catch tank here is mount it down here, actually that way round, rather than have the breather on top. I fitted two pipe connectors here to the in and out. I'm going to mount it down here on a bracket there. This airbox actually has quite a lot of room underneath it, so the hose shouldn't be too difficult to extend from there down there underneath the airbox into the in connector on the catch tank. We can see there's, I'll carefully lift that out, there is a bolt here, and there's also a hole here, there, so we can put a bolt in there. So if I make a bracket that fits between here and here with the can on it, should be quite easy then to reach down, undo the can to empty it, also to get to that little dipstick. The hose can come round here, and then the hose, the output hose with the breather on, can just come up here or up over here, wherever really, somewhere else, not out of the top of the can. So as long as the breather is fairly high up, shouldn't be any issues with oil coming out downhill to the breather and dripping out everywhere. It needs to be higher up than this. So right, what I need to do now is design a bracket to go from there to here and take the can, mount it onto it like that. Okay, so here is my design for the bracket that will take the catch tank. This has been drawn in a free web-based piece of software called Tinkercad. It's a website you can sign up, and then you can create your 3D designs using all these objects that are available on the right hand side. Place those on and change the size, and what we can do is add in holes, hex shaped holes here for nuts. You can even add threaded holes if you want for bolts and screws to go in. So just to explain what we've got here, this end here will be the upper end that will attach to the bolt at the top, at the top passenger side of the back of the radiator that we saw earlier in the video in the engine bay. The can will go here, so if I just hold out the catch can, the catch tank will go here like that, so it'll all be vertical. That holes in the bracket there, you can see those two holes there. This circular part here is actually a hole. It's a hole object rather than a solid object. That's to actually cut out this curved bit here. And then this piece over here is actually the piece that will go on here to connect onto the other bolt that we saw, the lower bolt. The reason I've made that in two parts is because when I print this, it's going to be printed in PLA, which is not suitable for putting in the engine bay. It's just not resistant to oil or heat or frost or anything like that. So the idea is that I'm going to print this in PLA and then make a mould and recast the same object in hard, rigid polyurethane. So we can't have this piece here sticking out here. It just won't work in a mould. So I've decided to make that as a separate piece with a couple of holes there, put some long bolts, some bolts like this, stainless steel Allen head bolts going down to some nuts underneath there. These holes here are just cosmetic, just saves a little bit of material and I think makes it look quite nice. So what I need to do now is export this design from Tinkercad. So I'm going to export this into a program called Cura. And Cura will do what's called the slicing. So Cura is a freeware open source program used for 3D printers. It doesn't actually drive the 3D printer directly. I've got an Ender 3 3D printer, so what I do is I produce a G-code file in Cura. So Cura does the what's called slicing of the design to work out all the layers that the printer needs to print and saves those into a file called a G-code file, which the printer will then read and print. So what we do is we can see the design here, so you can see a little bit clearer now what it's going to look like. So if I zoom in a bit there, so we can see we've got this top mounting point here, there's the other mounting point. This piece will be flipped over, bolted down onto there, the can will sit there. So what I'm going to do is 3D print this in PLA. I've tried to print designs like this in ABS and just didn't have a lot of luck. ABS is very difficult to print in, the model will warp and come away from the bed. Very, very difficult to get good bed adhesion with ABS. So I've decided instead to stick to what I know works, use PLA, which is a sort of vegetable oil based plastic. It's ideal for prototyping, and then I'll make some moulds and cast this in hard polyurethane, and then we'll have something which should be good enough to fit into the engine bay. Okay. Okay, so here is the 3D printed prototype. It took quite a few attempts to fine tune this, but this is the shape that I've ended up with. So we've got a sort of cutout there, which will take the catch tank exactly, and this piece here is a separate piece that's screwed down with a couple of stainless screws. That will bolt onto there, and this large hole here gives access to those Allen bolts there, just in case we need to undo those. So this is 3D printed in PLA. I will be making a silicone mould of this and then casting it in hard polyurethane, hard black polyurethane, which will be a bit more resistant to sort of heat and oil and fumes that are present in the engine bay. So what I'm going to do now is just take the catch tank off there. I'm going to fit this into position down in here. So this will go something like that. Hopefully it'll all line up. This is just a sort of trial fit, really, just to make sure that the shape is absolutely right before I start making a mould. Don't want to waste silicone by making a mould of one that isn't the right shape. So I'll do a trial fit of this, and hopefully it'll all fit in correctly. Okay, so I've put that in there now using a longer stainless Allen bolt there. I think it's an M6 Allen bolt, and then a slightly shorter one down there into this hole through here. When this is fitted properly, there'll be a nylock, stainless nylock nut on the back of there. So this is now in there, just finger tight for now. Let's just get the catch tank, put that in, just loosely in. Okay, so that's how it will look. Let go of that. Okay, so that is in there, nicely supported in there. A couple of bolts around the back should hold that nice and solid. Easy access then for the dipstick here, which can be checked. If the breather filter was put on top of here, then that could go there. Lots of clearance for it, and then plenty of room here for hoses to run round up to that one. So that will be extended down there, under there, probably to this one, I think is. Yeah, that's the inlet there, and then this one here will go out off to the breather. I'm not totally sure where I'm going to put that yet, possibly up the back somewhere. I just need to be a little bit careful of any fumes that are coming out of that. It might need putting further over here so it gets a bit of ventilation. I don't really want to risk any sort of fumes going into the cabin, so might need to keep it away from the air intake up here where the heater air is drawn in. There is actually a seal under here, but just need to still be a bit careful. So right, that is there. I'm happy with that, happy with the fitment. So the next thing to do is put this into a box and pour some silicone over it. Okay, so what I've done is to glue these two pieces into the bottom of this clear plastic box. Those are glued in nice and tight against the bottom. I'm now going to pour some of this silicone rubber, mix up this. It's a sort of a 10:1 ratio with the catalyst there. Pour in this silicone mould making rubber over the top of that, up to about probably about 4 centimetres, 4 to 5 centimetres deep, just below this this hole here, otherwise it'll be pouring out. Need to cover this point here, here and here I think are the same level, so that's the sort of highest point. That's a little bit higher than that, so we need to cover that with a good centimetre of silicone, and that will cure and set overnight, and then tomorrow should be able to pull out the silicone somehow, and these will probably come out with the silicone. Pull those out, and then we'll have a mould ready for pouring some polyurethane plastic in to make very similar looking items, but made out of a hard, rigid, durable plastic instead of the 3D printing PLA, which is not very strong, not very weatherproof. Okay, right, I'm going to mix the silicone, pour that in. There's all the silicone poured in. That's about, probably about 3.5, maybe 4 centimetres deep. It's covering the parts completely. If you're wondering why I've put 2 bottles of cider and a bottle of mushroom ketchup in there, there is method in my madness. Those will easily peel back out again in the morning. Those won't be affected at all. The silicone won't stick to them. It just means that I use less silicone, so it saves a bit of silicone, and it also adds a bit of flexibility to the mould. So it's easier to get the parts in and out when they're cast. So the more flexible the mould is, the more we can pull it around to wriggle out the not just the master PLA items, but the polyurethane items when they're cast in the mould. So so what I'm going to do now is leave that to set. It is fast setting silicone, but I'm still going to leave it overnight just to make sure that it's really set properly, and then we'll pull out these bottles, take the silicone out of the box, and see what we end up with. Okay, so the next morning, this is what we have. I've pulled out those bottles that were in there, and now using these holes I can lift out the silicone. Those are still in there, glued in, but this is what we end up with: the silicone, an exact mould. It's even got the little lines there of the 3D print, these bits here for the holes. So I can now pour in the hard polyurethane. There's a few little sort of whiskery bits here that just need trimming off carefully with a knife, just bits where the silicone has gone underneath the black PLA shapes. So I'll neaten this up, and then we can pour in the hard black polyurethane and see what we end up with. The only issue I'm seeing here is that whilst these bits here have come out okay, you can just see there where these holes were. These are the threaded holes. One of them has come out fine. One is kind of missing. It's this one here, and I don't think it broke off. I don't think the silicone has been left in there. I think it just didn't flow properly into the hole. The hole's too small, so it probably had a trapped air bubble. That's not a major issue. These little pegs here were to make small threaded holes for the ends of the screws that go through these holes to go into, but I'll just drill out. It's not a problem. I can just re-drill those into this item when it's cast, and allow the screws to sort of self-tap into this piece here. It'll probably be stronger like that anyway. So yeah, good. That's a good result. These holes here where I put the bottle just give a little bit of flexibility to the mould, you see, so we can easily get the shapes out when the casting is set. Okay, so I'm going to pour some polyurethane into this mould now, and see what we end up with. Okay. So this is what we've ended up with. Here's the bracket, two-part bracket, stainless steel screws going into there, holding those two parts together. This is cast in hard polyurethane. It's not a rubber polyurethane, this is a hard rigid plastic, sort of plastic that similar to Lego bricks, that kind of rigid, hard, durable plastic. Why did we make it out of this instead of leaving it as the 3D printed PLA? As I explained earlier in the video, PLA is not very good with heat. It's also not very resistant to oil and frost and things like that. The temperature at which PLA starts to soften, what's called the glass transition temperature, is about 60 degrees. Even though 3D printers run at about 180 to 200 degrees, anything above 60 degrees can soften PLA, which is fine outside the car, which is it's certainly in the UK not going to go any higher than about 30, 35 degrees, not going to go much lower than about minus 10 degrees C. But in the engine bay, temperatures can get much higher than 60 degrees, especially when things are bolted to the radiator. Could easily start to approach sort of 80, 90 degrees, maybe even higher after a long drive on a hot day. The engine's going to be pretty hot. It's the underbonnet temperature is going to be very high. Now, this polyurethane can withstand a much higher temperature. The glass transition temperature of polyurethane is about 93 degrees, but it has to go a lot higher than that before it actually starts to soften enough to weaken it. So I've made the mould, poured the polyurethane in, let that set overnight, and we now have something that looks like 3D print, but is actually a solid object, not constructed by layering up the filament. So I've put on the catch tank there. You can see there that fits nicely, nice and tight into that curve there. Not too tight that the can can't be undone by hand. I've got to do up these stainless bolts and nuts here. Put a couple of washers on here just to sort of protect the polyurethane, just in case the nut starts to dig its way in. These here are accessible through this hole. That's what this big hole is for, to give access with an Allen key to those. And that will then mount down in here on that bolt there and that hole there that you can just about see there. So that will sit like that, and then these connections, these pipe connections here, one of them will run up to our breather hose. So the breather hose will be diverted down to the catch tank. So from here, that piece there, I'll cut that hose or pop that clip there, and that will run down there, under there, into the catch tank. And then the outlet from the catch tank, which should hopefully be just sort of gas rather than an oily mist. The idea of the catch tank is it takes the oil out of the gas, the vapor that comes out from the crankcase of the engine. So this is any blow-by gas that gets past the piston rings into the bottom of the engine, the crankcase, where the crankshaft is in the sump of the engine. Obviously you don't want to pressurize that up, because then you get oil oozing out everywhere, so you have to vent it off. And most cars just duct that straight back round to the inlet and re-burn it, and that means you're then getting already burnt gas going back in, which is not good for power performance. It's also not great for the engine, having all that sooty, oily rubbish put straight back into the inlet after the air filter, I hasten to add. It's also causing issues. You can see here we've got oil leaking out of this joint there. That oil's going down the back of the engine, it's getting on the exhaust, it's making a bit of smoky, hot, oily smell, especially after a long, fast drive. There is a smell of sort of burnt oil or hot oil inside the cabin of the car, which is where that oil has got down onto the turbocharger and the exhaust down the back of the engine. So this is a good idea to fit this. It's got a little dipstick on it, so as it collects the oil inside there, under there's a sort of a breather mesh inside the can, and then we can just check with this little dipstick to just see the gunge level in the can. And then the outlet, which I think is here, that will go off somewhere, haven't decided yet, somewhere to a breather, vent breather. Not totally sure where I want that to go. Probably up the back somewhere, I don't know. We'll see, we'll work that out later. The important thing at the moment is get this bolted in, and then we can look at getting that pipe off there and rerouting that. Now I can't just cut this and leave this open, because if that's open then loads of air is going to get sucked into there, and it's going to completely mess up the the mixture. For the engine, it's diesel, so it's not sort of carburation like on a petrol engine, but diesel still needs air. It's got to be mixed in the right ratio, so it's still important. So the last thing we want is a load of air flooding into there. So when I do disconnect this, I'll either have to block up this, probably this hole here. I don't know if that just pulls out, block that up, or ideally go for it, get rid of that lot and put my duct in at the same time. So we need to get this bolted in first, get this fitted in, and then we can worry about dealing with the duct. Okay, right, gonna get my tools out, get this bolted in, we'll see what it looks like. Okay, I've now fitted the catch tank in place. That's in there. On this bracket, put the M6 bolt in there, M6 Allen head bolt with a spring washer and a plain washer under that. That's going into this, or through this plastic mount. It's one of the sort of legs of the radiator, and then into the metal chassis. So that's nice and solid. As you can see down there, I've put another slightly shorter M6 Allen head bolt through with a washer each side, and a nylock there, and that is into this sort of metal here, which is also part of the bodywork. A couple of screws there holding the two halves together, and that's pretty solid actually. That's not going to go anywhere. I mean, it needs to be vibration proof. It can move a tiny bit just in the flex of the bracket, but that's fine. So the next thing to do will be to deal with this duct up here. I think the best order of doing this work really is to disconnect that pipe, replace this duct completely, all the way from that oily joint there all the way up to here, and then once that new duct's in, I'll then take off that elbow, put a joint on there, and run the hose down to here, which is the input, and then connect up some sort of outlet to a breather. It would be nice in the fullness of time to run a nice blue silicone hose, that's probably about a 13 or 15 millimeter diameter bore silicone hose, all the way round there and down the back to wherever that hose goes to. I think there's some sort of breather canister or something down the back of the engine. Can't see at the moment. Once this duct's removed, might be able to see down there. I might even be able to peer up from below and see where that hose goes to. But for now, I'm just going to split that joint and join it up to here. Okay, today is the day. Today I'm going to be fitting the blue ducting here, up to here, disconnecting this and routing that hose over to the catch can here that I fitted on the bracket there. Okay, what I've done in preparation is removed the engine top cover just to allow me to see where that hose goes. It looks like it's actually quite short. I thought it went down the back of the engine, but it goes just to here, which is a sort of breather canister. It also allows us to see a few of the other hoses across the top of the engine. This long one here is the exhaust gas recirculation hose, which goes into the inlet. Now I have blanked that off with a plate. There's a separate video on my channel showing what I did there. Okay, so that's an emissions control feature. The duct exhaust gases back into the inlet to reduce the combustion temperature and prevent things like nitrogen oxide and things like that, some nasties. Of course, if you're breathing your own farts, as they say, it's not going to do anything for performance, so I've blanked that off. Separate video for that one. Not going to talk too much about that now. Let's have a look at this hose here. So this hose here is actually connected up with this one. The way it works is you put your oil in here, and you can see the oil goes down in there. Now you can't really see it, but out of sight there's a sort of oil strainer, a chamber with mesh inside, which will allow fresh new oil poured in here to drain down into the sump, but it also allows the blow by gas, the gas that's got past the piston rings, to exit up from the sump up a pipe, the same pipe that the oil flows down when you pour oil in, but normally the gas comes up that pipe through a mesh just to try to filter out some of the oil in that vapor, and then it comes up this pipe here. Okay, so you can't see it, it goes down out of sight down there, but it comes up here, round here, round there into this block here, and that is one of the camshaft covers. So it's just a kind of plastic cover over the back camshaft. I'm not sure which camshaft, probably the exhaust inlet cam is on this side, I would have thought, but there's a sort of cover on the top of the engine which may have more vapor and oil mist. Finally it goes through this, which is a sort of another little chamber, possibly, some people say it's the PCV valve, positive crankcase ventilation valve. So positive crankcase ventilation basically means that the engine is actively sucking that gas out of the crankcase. Okay, so it's actually, personally I would call that negative pressure actually rather than positive, but it's called positive crankcase ventilation, PCV, and the valve there, if that is a valve, will control that venting. Now, even if it only allows that gas out of there when we're not demanding high power from the engine, which I don't think it does, I still don't want all that grop going back into the engine, because it's going in here, it's going in after the air filter, it's going in straight into here, straight through the turbo and up into the inlet and back into the cylinders. It's not a good thing to be doing. The car manufacturers have to do it for emissions. They can't just dump that grot out on the road or anything like that, so they have to be seen to be dealing with all of the various fumes and gases that come out of the engine and making sure that they only go out of the exhaust. So that's why all that kind of gubbins is there, dealing with all that, feeding that back up in here. So I don't want any of that. I want to send the gas to here to strain off any gunge, and then just have the vapor coming out of there off on another pipe to a breather. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're not dumping anything onto the road. The idea is that I use the little dipstick here, have a check, and when it's full I just unscrew this and I just empty it out somewhere, don't know where. Not in the flower bed or down the drains, but maybe just soak it up in a bit of kitchen roll or something and throw it in the bin. So yeah, so what am I going to do? Okay, so I'm going to compress this clip here, remove that. I'm going to compress the clip over there, remove that, take this whole piece out, do the same here and disconnect this somehow, and then we can have a better view of what we've got in the way of hose diameters. You see this one here, this is quite big. It's actually probably about 20mm diameter, and also where the hose goes onto that end there, you can see it enlarges quite a bit. I'll try and get the camera to focus in there. So that's probably about a 15 to 20mm output. Now if I just wiggle this hose, you can actually see down here where it connects on. If you want to film this, you see there it's moving. So that suggests it's just a press fit, it's just a rubber press fit on the end there. So one option would be to take my new hose all the way from that sort of output spur on that chamber there. Take that all the way around. Now I am going to have a bit of a problem there. That is a good 20 millimeters, possibly more, that output there, without actually getting in there and measuring it. But then we look at the size of these. These are about 12 millimeter, 10 to 12 millimeters. So I'm going to have to do some reducing somehow of the hose diameters. Not sure how yet. Can buy reducers and hose connectors and things like that. So we'll I'll just have to work that out as I go. But the priority really is to get this replaced with the blue silicone, and then get that one as a secondary task, get that one somehow connected up to here and deal with the catch tank. Okay, so let's get this duct removed. Right, so by using some pliers here, compressing this clip here like so, and then work that off. It's a bit fiddly. Oh, come on. Okay. Now, the first thing I'm seeing here is a little bit worrying. Definitely evidence of muddy water going through there. That'll be my antics on Salisbury Plain. Went through some very deep puddles, and it looks like a bit of water has been sucked up through there, so I was very, very lucky not to get hydraulic lock. There is a known issue with the Freelander 2s. At the bottom of the air filter box down here, there is a drain hole, and it's meant to have a rubber sort of diaphragm over it to prevent water coming back up in if you're wading through deep water, but it will allow any rain or car washing hosepipe water, any water that does get through there and goes down in. The idea is that the rubber seal, the rubber sort of circular diaphragm, will bend and allow the water to get out, but when you go through deep water it sort of closes shut. I know that my car doesn't have one, and I am going to be doing something about that, and that will be done in another video, hopefully next week or the weekend after. I will look at fitting some kind of new rubber diaphragm there. Land Rover didn't fit those diaphragms to a lot of models. It's very, very common. So if you go through deep water, if you go through fords and big deep puddles like I do, then it's worth just undoing these sort of bolts here. Just lift the thing up, lift the air filter out, and just have a look inside just to see. I know of at least one Freelander 2 that did get hydraulic lock, and sadly the engine was wrecked, and bent valves, bent com rods, whole new engine required. So worth checking that and worth doing something about it. So we'll cover that in another video. So what I'm going to do now is try to take this pipe off here. That's a bit fiddly to do. Okay, let's do the other one first. Try this one here. I think I need a... Oh, there we go, that one's quite easy. About to say I need a bigger pair of pliers, but that is actually... I think I'll have to just... Oh, there we go. Oh God, what a mess. What a mess. Oh, look at all that. There's loads of oil in there. Loads and loads of oil. That's where all the oil is coming from. It's underneath the car. If I tip that up, it's just thick black engine oil, loads of it. So we've got water at this end and oil at that end. what's in between? The breather hose. So the oil has to be coming from that breather hose, and this is why I want to change this and get rid of this thing and duct that breather over to the catch can. I don't want all of this thick grotty black oil going into my engine after the air filter and going in to the cylinders. That can't be good for the engine. I know a little bit of oil is you know, good for lubrication. There is one school of thought that says that this oil is actually good because it lubricates the valve guides, certainly the inlet valves, but I would argue that on a brand new engine you won't have that oil. The piston rings will be sealing very well, you won't have that oil, so the inlet valves can't rely on blow-by gas oil for lubrication. They do have seals above and below, and the oil above the valves will be enough to lubricate those. The exhaust gas, the exhaust valves are constantly under high pressure with red hot gas. There's no oil in that vicinity underneath the valve guide, so that theory just doesn't really stack up. Those will be lubricating from above, and also the inlet valves are not always under pressure, even though it's a turbocharged engine. There are times where you lift off the throttle, and because the throttle body here actually has a butterfly in it that closes, you will still get a vacuum build up. If you didn't, you wouldn't get any engine braking. So some people who say, oh, on a turbocharged engine you need to dribble some oil into the inlet to lubricate the inlet valves, well, I just don't believe that, really. Don't believe that. You won't get that on a brand new engine, and you just, it's not under permanent boost from the turbo. So the valves will be lubricated from above. I know that there are seals on there, but just enough oil will get past those seals to lubricate the valves in their guides. So whatever theory we read up about this kind of mess is just not good. We just don't want that going into the engine. That's just going to make a load of smoke out the back. It's just going to end up with everything getting sooted up. So this has to come out. I need to disconnect that one now, get rid of this. When I get this off the car, I'm going to tip it up and we'll just see what drains out. I've got a feeling that there's a bit of a low point there, and there's just a load of oil sitting in there. So and one thing I have noticed is that when I accelerate very hard in this car, put my foot hard down, rev it up, you do get a little bit of a cloud of smoke out the back. It's not enough to sort of fail the smoke test at the MOT, but I've always wondered where that smoke came from, what was causing that smoke, and it's well, I think I've just found the cause, really. It's highly likely to be that oil, which when you open the throttle right up, that oil gets drawn in, and well, it's not going to do much for performance, that's for sure. Okay, right, let me get this duct off and then we'll see what we've got underneath. A couple of things I'm seeing here. First of all, that connection there for the breather hose is very oily. This end, whilst it's showing a bit of mud and water marks, is completely free of oil, and this end has loads of oil. So now that duct's out the way, let's have a little look and see what we've got here. So this end of this duct here actually has a metal insert. Even though it's plastic, there's a metal insert there just to stop it crushing when that clip is on. There is what appears to be, I don't know if this is a rubber seal or whether somebody has put some silicone sealant around it. Let's try and get that off. It's really, yeah, the remains of some kind of long dead seal. See, that was not doing its job at all, so I'll just chuck that on the ground for now. Bits of mess everywhere here. Okay, well that'll need really cleaning up before we put our nice shiny blue silicone hose on. Yeah, there's bits, I think somebody's put some black silicone sealant on here in the past. Strange actually, because I've owned the car for most of its life and I've never done that, but maybe it was when the cam belt was done 2 years ago at the garage, they decided to put bits of some silicone around this what looks like thread here. It's not really thread, it's more just ribs on there to allow that clip to get a good seal. It didn't work, as you can see from the amount of oil all over the place. So what we're going to do is get the blue silicone ducting and offer it up to this. Let's just clean this up a little bit. Tiny bit of oil around there just to get rid of that mud and dust. There we go, that's a bit better now. So I'll put the duct on first. This hose needs dealing with. I don't quite know. There doesn't appear to be a clip at that end, and that you can see that is loose, but that doesn't want to come off there. I thought it might be some kind of bayonet fit, so I tried sort of turning that, and it just absolutely doesn't want to come off there. I honestly don't know how that comes off. I thought it was some sort of half turn put on and turn to lock, a little bit like putting in a sort of a headlight bulb or something like that, where you put it in and rotate. But I don't know, it doesn't seem to be. Turn that right round. Even with it turned right round like that, it just doesn't want to come off. So what I'm going to do, leave just for now, I'll leave this black piece of pipe, and then the hose that comes from there probably could even fit inside. That's about 20mm. What I really need is a 20 to 10mm reducer. I'm sure I can get something on eBay that will do that, but just for now, I mean, it's not going to be under high pressure, so just for now I can probably just put the other hose in there and just put a cable tie or something around there just to hold it tight. So okay, right, okay, let's get the blue duct and see if it even fits onto the ends of these two bits of plastic. Okay, so here's the blue silicone duct with these nice chrome pipes joining two or three sections together, three pieces of silicone, two chrome pipes. Now this is obviously way too large. That's fine, I knew that would be the case, so I'm going to have to do a bit of trimming, a bit of careful trimming of these silicone hoses. So that will go on to there, and this will need cutting. Now this one here is a bit short, so I'll probably try and leave that at the same length it is. Need about probably about 25mm of pipe in each side, because I'm using these quite wide stainless steel Mikalor clamps. I'll get the clamps in a mo, we'll have a look at those. So this one's going to have to be cut down a bit, the pipe's into about there, so if I can cut that down, take off about 4cm off that, probably the same here, and then this one's quite long here, and this really will need cutting down. So what I'm going to do is dismantle this hose down, dismantle this duct, take all the hoses off, and start at this end and just construct it, cutting each piece as I go up to here, and we'll see how we get on. Okay, so I've put in the short blue pipe there. These are the clamps that I'm going to be using. These are Mikalor stainless steel clamps. These are W2, which is a mild stainless steel. They also do a W4, which is a sort of marine grade. Mikalor clamps available on eBay, etc. 73 to 79 millimeters. Okay, so this hose is 70 millimeter internal diameter, and you can see there these clamps are slightly larger than the hose because you do need a little bit of thread kind of showing there to kind of get them going. They've got a nice sort of socket thing on there. Now I had to cut down this one, and I'm going to have to cut down the other elbow there. The best way to cut these down is to actually mark up where you want to cut with a pen, with a permanent pen. Put on one of these clamps or a Jubilee clamp or something like that, and then just use a Stanley knife with a brand new nice super sharp blade, very carefully using the metal clamp as a guide just to cut round. Gives a very neat end then, nice neat cut. If you try and just do it freehand with a knife or trying to use scissors or something like that, you're just going to end up making a right mess at the end of the hose. So it's interesting actually that with this cut like that, we can actually see the construction of the hose. You can see they're quite thick, and they've got this quite a few layers. These are Ram Air, I think, make these hoses. Other brands are available, but these are good quality ones. You can see how many layers. They've probably got about 4 or 5 layers of the sort of mesh webbing, the fibre inside there, and then a kind of blue silicone inside and out. So kind of like you can see the lines. There's almost like a silicone tape or something put on the outside. Inside is completely smooth, so that must be the sort of dipped kind of silicone layer, and then they put the webbing around that, finishing it off with this kind of outer tape. So what I need to do now is, before I construct too much of this, I need to get some of these clamps on. So we need one there on that black plastic end, one there on the end of the silver pipe. So the silver pipe I pushed right in, so that's fully in, butted up against the black plastic one. And then now we're going to have enough clamps here. Oh, this is a bit embarrassing. I've got 4 clamps, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. I'll see. I'm going to need 6, aren't I? Okay, I've got a couple of large Jubilee clamps which will have to do for now. It looks like I need to buy 2 more of these Mikalor clamps. So we're going to have another one there on the end of that. That pipe's going to go there, onto there, and then that one here. And then I do need 2 more for the other elbow. I did buy them. I must have used them up on some other project. So yeah, I think I know where I used them. Actually, I used them when I did my intercooler hoses down here. Actually, I put one on each side of the intercooler behind here. Did have Jubilee clips on there and ended up changing them for Mikalor clamps. So okay, well, at least I know where the other 2 have gone. So there is a slight issue that I can see coming up here. This output here is not 45 degrees to that. It's actually more like sort of 30 degrees. Well, we'd actually need a 60-degree bend to go from here to here, rather than a 45. If I just go and get the 45-degree pipe, let's just grab that one, and now this is going to need cutting down as well, but we can see that when we put that on lined up with that outlet, it's not like that, it's at an angle. So for now, I'm going to have to try and just bend that a bit. It doesn't like being bent, this hose. It tends to kink up. So yeah, hope that's going to work. I'll have to order a 60-degree elbow, but I do need to get this all back together tonight. I'm taking it apart now and I need to drive the car tomorrow, so I'll have to find a way to make this work somehow. Maybe there's a bit of movement, yeah, there's a bit of movement in the airbox a little bit. So I'm sure we can get it together well enough to start the engine and drive. But it looks like I will need to get a different elbow for the connection from there to the air filter box. So right, I'm going to get some of these clips on now, and then I can put this piece on here and try and work out how much I need to cut this down. Okay, so I cut about 20mm off each end of this elbow. You can just about see a bit of the metal hose joiner there. This actually has gone in quite well. There's a very slight sort of kinking of that there, but that's perfectly good enough. That end there is pushed back a bit, so I think I will need to get the correct 60-degree hose there, but for now it's in. The issue I've got is with these clamps. These are, as I mentioned earlier, these are what size? 73 to 79, which I thought was going to be way big enough for a 70mm hose. The problem is though, when you put on the ends here, it does get stretched a bit. Even though the actual plastic outlet under there and under there are 70mm, and the metal pipes are 70mm, when the hose is stretched over them, these clamps are slightly too small. Try and put them on, and let's just try one again. I tried putting one on that one there and it was just too small. So what I'm going to do, just for now, I've got this Jubilee clip, this black Jubilee clip there, which is a 70 to 90mm Jubilee clip. I haven't tightened it up yet, but as you can see, that's fully extended out to 90, and there's not a lot of room under that, so I'll tighten that up. Looks like we need clamps, Mikalor clamps are about 80mm. Don't know what the next size up from this is, probably I don't know, 79 to 83 or something like that. So it looks like I'll need to get about 6 of those and fit them in, as well as the right hose here. But at least it looks, in principle, it looks like it's going to work. That's all in there. Haven't done anything with this breather hose yet. That's still kind of sitting there, venting to the open air, which is not ideal. I think in a minute, once I've done something with these are all on pretty tight, and don't forget this is just an inlet duct. The engine is going to be sucking air in on that. It's not an intercooler hose which gets pressurized by the turbocharger, so I can't really see any reason why these would suddenly decide to pop off, but they really do need clamps on there. It's just these are just not fitting snug enough to just run without. They do need to be clamped, so unless I can find a way, I might see if I can use these are 60 to 80. I've got 2 of these which I could put one there and one maybe there for now till I get the right clamps. I don't even know if those 80mm will do up, but well, I'll find out and we'll see. But it's in there, it's in, at least it sort of fits in, but I'm not totally happy with the fit, really. I don't like this hose is not the right angle, and the clamps are too small, so I will need to get a few more bits before we can do this properly. Okay, so what I've done here is I've just put that 70 to 90 Jubilee clip there, and this one is an 80 70 to 80 millimeter. You see it's only just poking through, but it was just long enough to catch on the thread and tighten that around there. I've left these ones disconnected for now because these pipes do have a barb, not a barb, but a sort of a lump bit on the end there, a ridge around them, which will hide that. This is not going to go anywhere, it's all really solid. So these ones I've just tried again to put these on around there, but you just can't get the thread to bite. It's just too big, and it's just to get it on that bit. I might be able to get it going there and move it up maybe, I'm not sure, but right on the limit. So anyway, I'm going to start the engine now and just see what happens, see if it sounds any different, just to see if you know, if it runs all right with this ducting there. I'm just wondering what that is under there. There's some wiring and things under there. I need this to be up out of the way. It would be very interesting to run the engine with this breather hose disconnected and just see what actually comes out of there, whether it's smoke or oil, steam, don't know. Who knows what will be coming out. So I'm going to start it up and just see, let's just see what it sounds like. Be alright to do it with all those things there. Right. Immediately I noticed no difference at all. It sounds exactly the same as normal. The engine is running the same as normal. Let's see it coming out of there. I feel like my hands near the end. I can feel some cold sort of air blowing out of that. I'm guessing as the engine heats up, that'll be blowing out warm air, hot air. There's no oil dripping out of that. It seems to be running quite happily. I'm going to switch that off now. Switch that off and at some point I'll go for a test drive and just see if the car feels any different, performs any different. I would like to get those either Mikalor clamps, or maybe I can just pop to Halfords tomorrow and get some large Jubilee clamps like that one, or a couple more of these, just to allow that to be clamped up, just you know, just to avoid any hoses popping off whilst I'm driving. The worry is that this is the airflow sensor here, so if any of this did pop off whilst the engine would probably still run, because it's still going to be sucking air in, it's not going to be controlling, it's not going to be measuring the airflow and temperature, so everything could go get a bit haywire on the sort of mixture side of things. Okay, so I've just been for a quick test drive. I know I haven't got all of these hose clamps on yet. I've put another 80mm Jubilee clamp there, so we've got two there, one there. It's only these three here that aren't clamped, but it's on sufficiently tight to drive. So I've just been for a drive. The results are good. The engine is running nice and smoothly. seems a little bit more powerful. There's no hesitance. I've been suffering with hesitance on this engine for years and years and years, ever since I've owned the car, and that seems to have kind of gone, which suggests that oil and gas going in was sort of causing something to go a bit screwy with the mixture or something. I don't know. So it's all running very well. I'm very, very pleased with that. One interesting thing is I've left that hose deliberately disconnected for now, just to see if anything comes out of it. And there's oil, thick black oil, splattered up the side of the battery box there. So there's definitely a lot of oil coming out of there, which the engine's done nearly 150,000 miles, so I'm not too surprised that there's quite a lot of blow-by gas in the crankcase. I'm a little bit surprised at the amount of oil that is coming out of there. I mean, I drove probably about 1 mile and that has come out of there. So previously that was going into the engine, and some of it was leaking out and dribbling all over the back of the engine, going down onto the turbocharger, making a load of smoke and a stink. So yeah, it looks like this catch tank may need emptying quite often. We shall see. Might have to, might need a bigger one, but at least that does prove where the oil's coming from. So tomorrow I will get some extra clamps, and I'll just get Jubilee clamps for now. I'll need to order some larger Mikalor clamps, which can go on in a few days when they arrive. So I'll call it a day for today, and we'll pick this up tomorrow when I get the additional clamps on, and we'll look at routing that pipe down to the catch tank and adding the breather on as well. Okay, so the saga continues. I now have the correct size Mikalor clamps. These are 79 to 85 millimeters. I also went for the W4 grade, which is the marine grade stainless steel. So I bought 6 of those at vast expense to replace the other 4 or 5 that didn't quite fit. I realised the other day I made 2 schoolboy errors. These hoses are 70 millimeter diameter. That's the internal diameter. The walls are about 3 or 4 millimeters thick, so the external diameter of the hose is about 81 millimeters. And when you push it over the end of something like this, or the lip on the end here or here, it gets even bigger. It gets stretched slightly. So that's why my previous Mikalor clamps, I think they were 76 to 79 millimeter, wouldn't do up. They wouldn't even, the thread just wouldn't bite when they were opened right out. So now that I've got 79 to 85, these fit on perfectly. So you can see there, we've got those 2, and then we've got these here. Now there is a bit of thread sticking out there, which I don't know if you can see, which has actually sort of embedded itself a little bit into the soundproofing, but I didn't really want to turn these round the other way, because then the thread stuck downwards, which will stop the engine cover going back in there. Now I haven't put the engine cover in yet, because in this corner there's a threaded stud sticking up, which will go straight through the bottom of this hose, so I need to hacksaw that off or remove it some other way. So I've just left the engine cover off for now. This here, the second schoolboy error that I made, was that I used a 45-degree bend, which is the wrong angle. Okay, so this output here is more like 60 degrees here rather than 45. So when that's like that, that just, as you can see there, it's just not the right angle. So it was actually sort of kinking like that when I was bending it. So now we've got the 60mm hose, and I've trimmed that down slightly here, about well, that much came off there, and that much came off there. That has gone in nicely. It's not kinked, it's perfect fit, really good. So that's the actual ducting done. Those clamps are all tightened up now, and that's in there. I've been driving around like this for about a week now. Well, with the other hose, I've only just swapped that one over. But even with that hose, the results were really good, really good. There's hardly any hesitance now when changing gear and accelerating, pulling out of junctions. The engine just feels more solid, more powerful. The acceleration is really smooth but strong. The car is like driving a new car all over again, and I can only guess that that's because all that burnt fumes, combustion gases and blow-by gas, which had already been burnt in the chambers, plus all that oil was going into the inlet, just completely messing it all up. It's no wonder it was underpowered with all that crap going in there. So that's good. I'm really pleased with this. Let's have a little look at the catch tank, okay, because that's sitting down there. Now what I've done for that, you can just about see, if I get the light, I've used a 19mm to 13mm internal diameter 45-degree elbow. So I cut the old hose off there. If I just focus this light, so there I couldn't get the old hose off that plastic elbow, so I just cut it in the end, pulled it off, pushed on that. I should really put some small hose clips, Jubilee clips on that, but it's not under pressure, so it's just sitting there quite happily at the moment on its own like that. The old hose didn't have any clips either, so I've just connected that there, and then at the moment you can just see down in here I've just got in there a 13mm barbed sort of male to male hose connector, like a little hose joiner piece, which is just interfacing that blue silicone to this black Halford's radiator heater hose here, which is a sort of a black rubber hose. Now I have actually got some 13mm bore silicone, blue silicone hose, which is a similar to the blue end that you can see there, and tomorrow or over the weekend I'm going to run that down into the catch tank there, and then run another piece up, probably up here, this space up here, to the breather. Okay, so the alternative place for the breather would be maybe up here in this space here. It really needs sort of tying to something, or I don't want it just hanging in midair really. It does need to be fairly high up, because if I ever do go through deep water, I don't want any water entering through the breather. So maybe up here, maybe over there. I'll decide when I come to actually do that. So I've been driving with this catch tank fitted like that, just with that output pipe there open. Now nothing really, there's a bit of wetness down there, but that's just from when I went through puddles earlier. There's no oil or anything, no oil has been coming out of that outlet there. I'll just balance the torch there, and we can see if, let's try to put this torch somewhere like that. If I reach down, this is going to be a bit tricky, reach down and try and unscrew this can. Well, first of all, let's have a little look at our dipstick, see if we can see any oil. Okay, nothing on there. A little tiny bit on the bottom, so it is serving its purpose and catching the oil. I've been driving this for about 3 or 4 days now. The amount of oil that was coming out of the pipe earlier, I was expecting more. Maybe it's well, we'll see. Maybe it's just doing a very good job of filtering this out. Let's just see what we've got in there. Yeah, there's a little bit of oil, not much. Definitely some in there, you can see. So that's good news, that it's not going to need emptying daily. Yeah, maybe every couple of weeks or so, probably about as often as I check the main engine oil with the dipstick. When I check that, I'll check this catch tank level as well. So tighten that up, make sure that's fairly tight, not too tight. I'm going to get it off. Right, there we go. That's all tight. I don't want that working loose and falling off. Yeah, so far so good. It all seems to be working. The results as far as performance and the sort of driving of the car are very, very good. A little bit of oil collecting there. What I'll do next is run that hose from this outlet here up to the breather, wherever I end up putting that, and yeah, try and refit the engine cover somehow, squeezing it in underneath all that, and that's it, job done. One more bit to this video, showing those bits, and then and that's it, complete. Okay, so the story so far: got this duct in now with a 60-degree bend, got the new Mikalor clamps on, 79 to 85 millimeters. That is all in there really nicely, and it's been performing very well. I've driven it for a week now like that, and very impressed with the results. Nice and smooth, good powerful acceleration, all very nice. What I've also done is connected up the crankcase vent there from this thing, which is the positive crankcase ventilation valve. It's basically a sort of a diaphragm that sort of vents when the pressure builds up. So that there is a 19 to 13 millimeter internal diameter, reducing 45-degree elbow. And then in here, just there, I need to put a couple of little Jubilee clips on here, but inside there is a brass hose joiner similar to this, just a sort of double-ended male-to-male barbed hose joiner. So I bought 2 of those. One is here, and the other one I'm just going to use on this breather here, just to kind of interface that to the other bit of hose. So this here, 13 millimeter reinforced silicone hose, goes down. I've cable tied it just to this here, which is the starter motor feed. Well, it's not the starter motor feed, it's actually an earth strap down to the starter motor. Around here, just cable tied it there as well. The reason why I've added those cable ties is just to keep it up out of the way of the gear linkages, which are down there and will be moving around. I don't want that hose to sort of warm up and sag down and get mashed up by those moving levers on the end of the gear change cable. So that then comes round there, under here, under the sort of cut out on the corner of the airbox, and up into here. Put a little clip there. Need to get a couple more of those just to prevent this brass joint from separating up. You can just about see it in there, but I want these hoses to stay nice tightly together. So that's all good. That's all good. Now, what I'm going to do now is just start the engine. Let's just move these things out of the way and put that down there. Start the engine and just see what we've got coming out of that vent there, because I am a little bit concerned about the amount of fumes that are coming out of there. Been driving it a couple of days like this, and there's a little tiny bit of drippage of oil down there, but this is pretty clean. It's mostly gas that comes out of there. The oil catch can is doing its job and removing the oil, but the gas that's coming out of there is basically exhaust fumes, really. It's just combusted gas that's got past the piston rings. I'm smelling it in the cabin. Okay, so I'm driving along, even though there is a nice long seal along the top of the bonnet, which should stop any fumes from the engine bay from finding their way up into here, which is the other side of this seal point here. That's where the fresh air intake for the heater is, and there are fumes getting in. I can smell it. I can just sort of kind of got that tickle in the back of my throat, which is not good at all. So I need to do something about that. I'm also been reading up on the internet and just venting that to atmosphere with a little breather like this. If I had a breather sort of over here or over there, it's not going to pass the MOT. You used to be able to do that kind of thing on old classic cars. I used to have an old Mini that had a catch tank with a breather, no problem at all. Nowadays, the only way to get rid of any fumes is out of the exhaust tailpipe. Any other venting and it risks failing the MOT. So there's two reasons really why all of this effort may have been all for nothing. Let's start it up and see what happens. Okay, right, get the what I'm looking for are the fumes coming out here. Now, at first glance, I can't see any, but if I hold that beam right closer in, you can see that's quite bad. Right, let's turn that off. Right, so might have a bit of a problem there. Okay, so there is quite a lot coming out of there. It just looks like sooty exhaust fumes, really. The catch tank will remove most of the oil, but it's not actually filtering the gas, which is a problem. So I need to have a bit of a think about this. What I'm going to do, rather than mount this breather sort of high up here, is I might see if I can just put it down low, possibly even upside down. I don't think it has to be that way up. Originally I didn't want to put it down low because I was a bit worried about going through deep water and water somehow getting drawn back into the engine via the breather, but the amount of gas coming out of there, no water is going to go back up that pipe. So yeah, it's a shame. Now, if putting the breather down low works and the fumes then go out under the car, then all I'd need to really do then is, come MOT day, is take a pipe, rather than to the breather, is take it up and put it into the air filter housing. The obvious thing to do would be to inject it in low down here, just run a pipe straight across into there, into the air filter housing on the upstream side of the filter, so that the fumes are then filtered. Yes, there's going to be inert gas going into the inlet, which is what we're trying to avoid with all of this, but the next best thing will be leaving them flowing in there but filtering them so that the soot and any oil vapor is removed. The only concern with doing that is the air filter could become clogged fairly quickly. That gas coming out there looked pretty dirty, and certainly if there's oil vapour in that, it could end up restricting the airflow through the filter. So I think what I'm going to do for now is just put the breather on, stick it down as low as possible so that the fumes then get carried down under the car rather than coming up and into the air intake, and we'll see how that goes. But I am going to have to do something for the MOT. That's not going to be acceptable for the MOT, that they'll fail it. So I think what we'll do is we'll conclude this video with the breather being down low for now, and then a bit later in the spring I'll do another video showing what I ended up doing for the MOT. The immediate thing is to sort of just put a sort of pipe connector, tank connector on the side of the airbox, either below or above. It could end up going in here maybe, and run that round and up and in, and stick those fumes back in there, either above or below the filter. So this video I think has gone on long enough, so let's just do the last little bit, get this extra bit of hose. I've got some more hose, not this hose is some other silicone hose I bought, which is just, it's not reinforced, it's just floppy, really bendy and too flexible. So I've got a bit here left over from the other piece where I cut it down, so I'm going to run that from here down and just sort of just point it down there as low as I possibly can, and then the only other thing to do then is to try and get that engine cover back on. I'll have a go at that in the daylight tomorrow. Shouldn't be an issue with this here because the cover comes to about there, but going along here it does go under there, so I'm going to have to sort of do something to get that underneath there, and that'll be it. Okay, here we are again, not quite there yet, but very, very close. So what I've done, put some small Jubilee clips on there. These are just normal Jubilee clips. Note then the ones without the holes in there, because they tend to cut into the hoses. These are, I think 16 to 22. It says 12 to 22 on there, but they were in Halfords as 16 to 22 millimeter clips. Put two there, either side of that brass hose joiner. That hose is now nicely far against this cable duct thing here, nicely to the right, out of the way, so that when the engine cover goes in, it doesn't hit that. That hose goes along, cable tied with a large reusable cable tie to this starter motor. I think that's the earth strap for the starter motor, and then down and into here with small cable ties on here. Done these up tight. This catch tank did actually come with little rubber grommets to put under there, but as you tighten them up, the rubber grommets just got squeezed out, so might need some fibre washers or copper washers or something underneath there, but I've just tightened those up nicely so that they don't leak. This one over here had a little bit of an oiliness underneath it. Originally this one here was going up over here to a breather. Too many fumes were finding their way into the car, even though the sort of air intake is sealed, is the other side of a seal, this seal at the bottom of the bonnet. The air intake mesh there was still ingesting fumes from the engine bay. I could smell them inside the car. It was just yeah, it wasn't good. Every time I pulled up at a junction there was a big cloud of smoky fumes coming out from the front of the car, so didn't like that. What I've decided to do, bought another long length, a 1 meter length of this 13mm bore silicone, reinforced silicone hose, and run that down over there, being very careful to keep well away from the gear linkages and things like that. Kept that far over onto the sort of left side of this area, and what I will do is very shortly put the car up on ramps and get underneath and put this breather. It will be upside down, it will be hanging down the back of the engine, but that is better than having it upright over here and smelling all those fumes. So the idea really is that it should be just gas coming out of there, not oil. There might be a tiny bit of oil vapor, but with the mesh filter inside here, the catch tank, and plus that breather mesh there, any oil should be trapped. Don't want to be dripping oil onto the road, but it will just be fumes coming out under the car, which will then be carried safely away in the wind. MOT time, I don't think that will be good enough. So what I will do is I will use this shorter piece of hose here, and I'll run that from here up here and into here. I'm not going to put it in on the upstream side of the air filter, because all that soot and grot and oily vapor will soon clog up the air filter. I know it's just for one day for the MOT, but I don't know. I'd prefer to just not risk that really. We'll put it back pretty much as it was, just going in here and into the inlet, just for the MOT, so it can burn off any of that certain oil vapor, and the emissions and all that will be good enough to pass the test. And then I can reinstate this hose here going down the back. Bit naughty, but that's what I need to do really. I don't want my engine to be breathing all that sooty, oily mist really. I've been running like this now, driving this for about 2 weeks now, and it is remarkably better. It is really nice. It runs well. The engine, when I switch the engine off, it shuts down almost instantly. There's no coughing and spluttering. There's no sort of overrun due to that oil getting ingested into the engine. The acceleration's smoother. There's no hesitance. It's just like a new engine again. It's just so much better that I can't go back to the way it was before. It just was just much worse. So so 2 things left to do, because this video, I'm fully aware, is now approaching 2 hours long. You've probably all lost the will to live so far, but if you are still watching, all I need to do now is put the breather on the end of that hose down the back of the engine, just secure that with a cable tie, and then get this cover back in here, and that is it. We're done. End of the project, and move on to something else. Okay, let's get the car up on ramps. Okay, so I've got the car up on ramps now. Here we are up on ramps, and there's the other end. You can just about see the other end of the blue hose. And what I've done is just cable tied that. There's a bit of a sort of void here. Hopefully that won't rattle against the floor pan while I'm driving along. I've cable tied that to these large cables there, which are actually the gear change linkage cables. Just cable tied that here so that it's well away from any sort of heat shields or hot exhaust or anything like that. So that should vent out nicely underneath the car, and hopefully none of those fumes will find their way into the cabin. I think that will do it for now. Just that engine cover to refit and job done. Okay, right, that is it. The project is complete. After many months of designing brackets, making moulds, fiddling around, working out how the heck to do this, it's finally done. Engine cover has gone back in. A little bit of a squeeze getting it under there, but it's in, it's screwed down. Giving that a clean up, giving this a bit of a polish. It's all looking really nice, and it's running well as well. So there's our catch tank, there's the bracket, that's in there nice and solid. All these clips there, and then that pipe is taken carefully down the back of the engine and then clipped in underneath the car. So just to recap what we've got here, 70mm internal diameter, a short straight piece that's about 8 centimeters long, 90-degree elbow and a 60-degree elbow. 6 Mikalor clamps. These are the W4 marine grade stainless, and the size is 79 to 85mm. Then underneath here we've got a 19 to 13mm reducing 45-degree elbow to this joint here. 2 16 to 22mm Jubilee clips with a brass hose joiner in the middle. That pipe comes along here, carefully cable tied in. You can just about see it there, cable tied in there to the starter earth cable. Round here, notice I've not tied it to this. This is not the bonnet release cable, this is a breather hose that goes all the way to your header tank over there. Don't really want to start putting any strain on that at all. Tie these two together into here, into the catch tank, dipstick there, that's on the bracket, and then the outlet goes off down to the breather vent underneath the car. Come MOT day, I'll replace this pipe with a short one coming up here into a little pipe connection into here, just to avoid any issues with the emissions. That is it. Thank you for watching. It's been a long video, I know. Thank you for watching it this far. Don't forget to click subscribe for more exciting videos coming up soon. Goodbye, thank you, bye.